Hello and welcome to Mr. Quickest Teachers. In today's lesson, I'll be providing a detailed analysis of the poem Plenty by Isobel DIXON. My analysis will be presented with rolling annotations of the stanzas, lines, and important words and phrases in the poem. I'll emphasize the themes, literary devices, both figurative and poetic, tone, structure, language, diction of the poem. To purchase the course that provides stanza by stanza, line by line, and word for word written and video analysis of all the 15 poems in the IGCSE anthology, visit mrquickestteachers.com. The written course has particularly been helpful to students sitting the IGCSE because it gives clear guidance on their approved writing styles. Without further ado, let's demystify Plenty by Isobel DIXON. Let's begin by speaking about the poet. Isobel DIXON is a South African poet. She was born in 1969 in Matata. The poem Plenty is one of her most known poems. A bit of a background before we dive into the poem. Plenty deals with DIXON's life, earlier life, and is recounted mostly in past tense from the first to the sixth stanza. The seventh and eighth stanza drags the reader into the present, and he speaks about DIXON's formative life, how she lived in lack, and how the struggles of her mother in trying to sort of chaperone them into adulthood. And in the last two lines of the last two stanzas of the poem, we see that DIXON is prosperous now, wealthy, and she speaks about missing her sisters and her mother finally smiling. And her mother's mouth is one of the most important metaphors in the poem. Let's begin by first reading the poem, Plenty by Isobel DIXON. When I was young and there were 5 of us, all running riot to my mother's quiet despair, our old enamel tub, each stained and pocked upon its griffin claws, was never full. Such plenty was too dear in our expanse of drought, where dams leaked dry and windmills stalled, like Mommy's smile. Her lips stretched back and anchored down in anger at some fault of mine, I thought, not knowing then it was a collapse to keep us all from chaos. She saw it always, snapping locks and straps, the spilling, sums and worries, shopping lists for aspirin, porridge, petrol, bread, even the toilet paper counted, and each month was weeks too long. Her mouth and lid clamped hard on this. We taught her mean, skip chores, swipe biscuits. Best of all, when she was out of earshot, stole another precious inch up to our chests, such lovely sin. Lolling luxuriant in secret warmth, disgorged from fat brass taps, our old compliant co-conspirators. Now bubbles slap my chin. I'm a Sarabite. I'm a Sabarite. The showers are hot cascade and water is plentiful to excess. Almost here, I leave the heating on and miss my scattered sisters and all those battles, squabbles, and at last, my mother's smile, loose from the bonds of lean, dry times and our long childhood. So the poem is in 8 stanzas. And one of the first things we see about the poem is the point of view of the poem. The poem is recounted in the first person. So DIXON is recounting her own experiences. And this is really vital because we see aspects of the poem that we may not have seen otherwise, especially the way she thinks about her mother. So she's speaking in the first person. And we see that she says, when I was. So the use of the word was there tells us that she's speaking about something that's happened in the past, in her younger formative years. And she's sort of nostalgic and taking the reader with her down memory lane. And there were 5 of us. So from the get-go, the reader realizes that there were 5 people in the house. The children were 5. DIXON included. So these were the number of children, and they were all a sibling. So she had 4 other siblings, all running riot to my mother's quiet despair. One of the first things we see about it is that she introduces alliteration, and we see that in the alliteration of the R sound in running riot and then the M sound in my mother. Now, alliteration provides vivid auditory imagery of the cacophony of her and her sisters running and knocking things over, while the alliteration of the M sound highlights their mother's palpable silence. So while they are running riot, their mother is quiet. So we see this contrast in behavior between, the children in their youth and in their energetic way, and then their loss of, or not sort of realizing there are things that they have to take care of. They have no responsibilities, but the mother understands that she has responsibilities, and Dixon describes her mother's attitude towards them as quiet despair, an oxymoron, which highlights the extreme frustration, and yet the silence with which the matron of the house sort of deals with her children. I think she uses silence as a way to control them. And Dixon continues that our old enamel top, so the top is one of the most important components of this poem. Our old enamel top, age-stained and pocked upon its griffin claws. So she uses the word old and age-stained to reveal that the top has been in the house for a long time. And the use of the word pocked upon its griffin claws personifies the top, and highlights the readiness of the top to be of use. And it also reveals a tone of pride at the ownership, that it is our own. They own it. Now, one of the clear thing that I see at the end of this first stanza is Dixon's introduction of the word was never full. Her use of the word was never full reveals to the reader that there was insufficiency in the house. There was lack. So they suffered from lack and insufficiency. And that's a very important theme, because it runs through the second to the sixth stanza. And then in the seventh stanza, there's this celebration that Dixon feels. And so she even describes herself as a Sabarite, very wealthy person. Now, she continues that we see enjambment again in this stanza as well. So we see the flow of words from the first line to the second, from the second to the third. So there's this flow of words, this energy that Dixon has that flows all through. She continues into the second stanza and says, such plenty was too dear. So we see here that she sees a full tub as plenty, and it was too dear. It was something that they couldn't think about. So the way she begins the second stanza strengthens the idea that the family lived in lack, while a use of too dear suggests that they could never bring themselves of thinking of such things, of ever having a bath in a full tub. So water is a very important commodity for the family, as we see here. And she describes their place of living as in our expanse of drought. And she further gives visual imagery of some of the things that could be seen there by saying that where dams lick dry and windmills stored. Now, dams and windmills are known parts of machinery that provides water, but here they are doing the opposite. So expanse of drought provides visual imagery of the vast, endless area that they live in, that with which there's no water. And water is part of the basic necessities of life. In fact, water is life, but they lack it here. There's extreme drought. Dams leak dry and windmills stalled. So the windmills are not working. The dams are also leaking dryness. Now, we see here that the dams and windmills, which are water yielding machines, contributed to the drought by doing the opposite of what they are meant to do. So rather than providing water for the family, they are rather making the place even drier. So we are not told the reason why the dams leak dry or why the windmills stored, but we understand that the family lacked water. And there's a full stop in the second line of the second stanza. Then Dixon adds, like mommy's smile. And I think this is really critical, because she's trying to tie the idea that the dams are doing the opposite of what they are supposed to do. And like a mother's smile is also doing something. So when a mother smiles, it has the opposite effect on them. Rather than making them realize that it's a happy time, they realize that it's something that whatever they're doing, they have to stop. And she continues that her lips stretch back. So when we see what we see here, that like mommy's smile here, we also see something that's quite critical for me that I found very fascinating. Dixon does not directly compare her mother's smile to the dams or to the windmills. There's a full stop to tell us that the idea or the thought is ended. Then she says like mommy's smile. That's like that's like she's trying to compare a mother's smile, but not directly to it. And I think she does this because she has this respect for her mother that makes it impossible for her to directly compare a mother's smile to something as as like the dams that are leaking dry and then the windmills. And she continues and say her lips stretched back and anchor down. Her mother's lips was like an anchor. An anchor keeps you in position. So her lips stretched back provides visual imagery of this mother's face fixed in a scowl. It also held them back from trouble. So her mother's mouth is very important in this poem, and we see that later on when she describes her mother's mouth as a clasp and also as a lid. Anchored down suggests that it was fixed perpetually in a mold. It also suggests that her mother's lips was what ensured that they behaved appropriately. So their mother's mouth was very important, and this is really important because when it comes to training up children, parents usually have to speak out and control with their lips. And she continues that in anger at some fault. So again here we see the fluidity of Dixon's thought. We see that there's a lack of end punctuation in the second stanza that runs into the third stanza. And we also see a dash at the end as well. The dash at the end suggests that there was a pause. Dixon sort of paused, I suspect, to find out why her mother, is angry. But then she continues and says, of mine. So she thought that her mother was angry with her. So the question is that, was Dixon the most troublesome, or was Dixon the oldest? For me, I think that Dixon must have been the oldest. And her mother expected her to behave better than she was behaving, I thought. So she no longer has that idea anymore. So we see the use of the word I thought there. She's changed her mind. And again, we also see another dash. Here, as a accessory, it indicates that Dixon paused. She paused and she sort of regrets considering that her mother was singling out for unfair treatment, because she sees here that she says, not knowing then that it was a collapse. A collapse is something that covers. So her mother was trying to cover them, from chaos. So she uses a mother's mouth here. She uses the collapse here as a metaphor for a mother's mouth. So to show that how quickly a mother's mouth would catch them in a wrong, and how quickly she would chide them or tell them that what you are doing is wrong. And the mother was trying to keep them from chaos, from being problematic, not only to themselves, but to society. And she continues and says she saw it always. A use of the word saw it always presents a mother as someone who is omniscient, like God-like. There is nothing that a mother doesn't see. And she begins to list some of the things that a mother would see. For example, snapping locks. So snapping locks suggests that they were going into places or prying into portions of the house, or portions of that their mother had kept that they shouldn't get into, maybe cupboards or rooms. And straps are, straps are used to like canes that were used to lash. So they snap the locks, and also the straps. They not only break the rules, but they also try to get away from the wrong that they had done. So they destroy the straps. And she continues the spilling. So there were also spillings as well. So they were like clots. So their mother would not be able to discipline them. While spillings shows that there were clots who always spilled liquid in the house. So there was a chance that someone could slip and then get injured. Sums and worries. So there were things that their mother had to add and provide information. And worries. Their mother had to worry about them, about food and about other things. And we are going to see how Dixon presents this. She says shopping list. And again here, because she's using the quatrain stanza in the first, the second, and the third, again, she continues using enjambment into the fourth stanza. And we see that enjambment is a really important tool that Dixon uses here. She uses it from the second stanza into the third, and it ends in the 10th line or in the second line of the third stanza. And from the third line of the third stanza, she continues again, and it flows and it ends in the first line of the first stanza. Shopping list. And the use of the word shopping list there reveals that they were buying groceries. Groceries was a constant need that they needed to get. They had to get groceries. And this was really important. Their mother had to worry about and list also reveals that they had to make different lists, and their mother had to prioritize what she could buy. We also see the use of sibilants in this the third stanza as well. You see that in repetition of the S sound in the last two lines of the third stanza. The sibilants, repetition of the sibilant sound reveals the clamor, the constant clamor and noise that was in the house. So running riot, snapping lock. So there was constant noise and cacophony in the house. We also see the enjambment as well, the lack of the end punctuation from the third stanza into the fourth. And it shows that it presents the detail for me. I think that their shopping list was very long, a very long shopping list. And in the fourth stanza, Isobel DIXON presents the makeup of the list. And all of these items, if you look at them, were essential commodities or essential items. Aspirin for their health, porridge like oats. It's tasteless but it's cheap. It's something that the mother could get. Petrol, basic fuel, and bread, which is a staple. So we see that everything that their mother bought were essential items. And for me, I think this is really striking because we see here the motherhood, how mothers sometimes go out of their way to provide and try to take care of their family, because they realize that that's their responsibility. She continues that even the toilet paper counted, and I think this is one of the most touching lines for me in the entire poem. There's this sense that they live in desperate poverty, so there was a need for their mother to micromanage every aspect of the resources. And she continues and says, and each month was weeks too long. So sometimes dragged on, and their resources were never enough. So their mother had to constantly make sure that she was trying to make maximum use of what they had. And she continues again and says, her mouth a lid clamped hard on this. So we see that her mother's mouth again is presented. It's a clasp, and now it's also a lid. Again, DIXON uses a metaphor to characterize a mother's mouth. As a lid, it prevented the Pandora's box of their bad behavior and of them misusing their resources from spilling over. So their mother sort of gathered them. And this is really important when it comes to speaking about the poem, because of the importance of the mother's mouth. And she says that we thought her mean. So all the siblings had contempt for their mother because they thought that she was mean, but not anymore. So her use of the word "we thought" shows that that's not the idea. That's not the idea that they hold anymore. And because they thought their mother mean, like somebody who was desperately trying to make their life miserable, DIXON recounts that they skipped chores, so responsibilities. So acts of rebellion that they took. Number one, skip chores. This provides visual image of them sliding past assigned tasks. The second thing was swipe biscuits. So that's the second act of rebellion. It presents them as professional thieves. And we see a pause. And then for me, I think that this pause sort of acts like some sort of like a precursor to a drum roll. And she says, best of all. So this is their most, if in their sort of like their pantheon of all the things that they had to do, this was the best of it. So like a drum roll to introduce their best form of rebellion. And she says that their best form of rebellion was when she was out of the earshot, when their mother was out of earshot, the third act of rebellion, they stole another precious inch. Stole reveals that they knew that what they were doing was wrong, but they did it anyway. Another precious inch reveals that water was their most prized commodity in their house. For DIXON, water was the most prized commodity, and we're going to see that image more and more. Again, she continues with the use of enjambment. So there's a sense of prolonged enjoyment. They enjoyed. And she says, up our chests. The water went up their chest. They were in revelry. They were enjoying. But she describes their actions as such lovely sin. So such lovely sin is a blend of oxymoron and sibilance. We see the oxymoron in the word lovely sin. Oxymoron is the side-by-side placement of two contradictory words or opposite words. And then sibilance is seen in the repetition of the S sound in such such sin. Lovely reveals that they experience untold satisfaction, while sin reveals that their action was against the law of God, but they engage in it anyway. Sibilance, such lovely sin reveals the hush-hush. There's this, silence. They did not want to make too much noise to announce themselves to their mother. Remember, their mother, she was almost like omniscient, so she could see everything. So as much as possible, they tried to sort of hide from, make her miss some of the things that they were doing. And we also see this iteration in the word lolling loxerantas, where it reveals that there was an almost divine extent to the enjoyment. They were lolling, there was maximum enjoyment. In secret warmth, disgorged from fat brass taps. So this gorge reveals a struggle between the water and the fat brass taps. I think for me that the fat brass taps, later, which Dickson is going to describe as our old compliant conspirators, was fighting against the water. The water didn't want to come out because the water, there was drought there already. So it suggests that the water was an unwilling participant and provides visual imagery of the excessive size of the taps, the fat taps. We also see personification as well in the use of the word old compliant co-conspirators. So the brass taps were with them. The fat brass taps were willing participants and encouraged the excesses of Dickson and her siblings. We also see the use of alliteration and consonants in the last two lines of the sixth stanza. The blend of alliteration and consonants reveal the sound of the struggle between the non-compliant water and the compliant co-conspirator taps, and the desire of the girls to cease every kind of noise. They wanted to hush every kind of noise and just enjoy their bath, still water, and just enjoy their bath. In the seventh stanza, there's a volta, there's a 10. So the reader is transported from the past to today, to the future. And this is really important because it says now, today, as she speaks, bubbles slap a chin. So it provides visual imagery of Dickson enjoying water, having a field time with baths. It also suggests that there's more water for baths and she's even running better baths. And she goes on and she speaks of herself and says, I am Sabarite. Sabarite is one devoted to luxury. So now Dickson is devoted to luxury and she worships and practices total and complete self-indulgence. And she continues with a metaphor and says the shower is a hot cascade. So here, Dickson is trying to present herself as somebody who has her own private shower. That's a hot cascade. You know, usually when you have like waterfalls, they are usually cold. But here she has her own personal or hot cascade water. And it never ends. So like her own private waterfall in her house. And she continues and says, and water is plentiful. So there is so much water. We see this idea from the fifth stanza where she says that stole on that precious inch. So we see that for Dickson, water is really important. She uses the availability, the excess availability of water as a mark of a past poverty and now a rich life. So, and it is really striking for me because more often than not, the things that people are unable to, indulge in when they are younger, those are the things that they usually indulge in when they are older as a sign to show that they move from poverty into wealth. And that's the same thing that Dickson does. So her affluence has made her unmindful also of the heating. So she says, I leave the heating on. So water is plentiful to excess almost here. There is so much water. So there is this sort of contrast in life between the past and the present. She continues into the last and eighth stanza of the poem. She says, and miss my scattered sisters. You see the alliteration of the M sound and sibilancing the repetition of S in scattered sisters. Together, this reveals that Dickson became emotional. She misses a scattered sister and there's a sense that her voice drops. The line also reveals that Dickson has kept a sensitivity, and a sense of emotion. So even though she's a Sabarite and she's enjoying all that life can offer, she's also a human being. She still retains her humanity. And she describes her sisters as scattered. So scattered sort of provides visual imagery of her sisters flung to all parts of the world. We are not told for what reasons, but there's a sense that maybe some they were married and then maybe some of them are off to university or some of them are just moved continents. Or she herself, Dickson, has also moved. So they are all moved to the far reaches of the world, while sisters reveal that all of these Dickson's siblings were females. So we see why their mother had to stand her ground and try to direct them aright. And she says here that all those bathroom squabbles. So what Dickson misses the most is the bathroom squabbles. They're fights that usually they had for space in the bathroom. And this introduces a theme of family, and it also shows that it is the unappealing aspects of life that usually we miss the most when we become rich or when we become older. The things that may not be people may not see as particularly fascinating. That's what most people tend to miss the most. And for Dickson, what she misses the most is the bathroom squabbles. And she says, and at last, my mother's smile loosed from the bonds of lean dry times and our long childhood. So the poverty or the lack of a formative years sort of was like a bond or something that sort of tied a mother's smile. But now with her affluence, with Dixon's affluence, her mother's smile is loosed, and it is now able to do what it's supposed to do, you know, in the past. It's no longer like the, you know, like the broken parts of the dam, stop or the windmill. Right now, as a mother's smile has been loosed, it's been freed from imprisonment of what she describes as lean, dry times. Lean shows that it was a very torrid time. Dry shows that it was a time that had no water, and their childhood was long because they suffered. They lived in penury and with meager resources. But now her mother's smile is free. Now, when it comes to the structure of the poem has 8 quatrain stanzas, and I think this is really fascinating because Dixon is trying to show that even though her younger years suffered lack, and then her older years she has like all she can have, there's still this quality to her that she's retained. So there's this structure that her life continues to hold. So stanza 1 to 6, in stanzas 1 to 6, Dixon remembers the lack of her formative years. She uses 6 of the 8 stanzas to reminisce about her younger years, which reveals that she is more fond of her years of lack, and it seems to be more drawn out to her. And I think it also took maybe longer. While stanzas 7 and 8 speaks about Dixon's present affluence and her mother's freedom and the fact that she misses her sisters. Some of the themes of the poem Plenty includes lack versus plenty, family ties, parenting, memories, nostalgia, the struggles of a single parent, because even though I don't see the presence of a male or a second male parent, motherhood, the burdens of motherhood, sisterhood, you know, sisters growing up in progress. And usually for the IGCSE, questions are usually presented with the themes. So a fair questions that could be thrown to you, for example, in the IGCSE is, how does Isobel DIXON vividly present the lack and later plenty of older years in the poem Plenty? So these are some of the ideas that you could be there. So how does Isobel DIXON strikingly carry the reader with her on a travel of nostalgia into a younger year? So those are some of the questions that you could be asked. If you want to get access to the poem, courses that help you customize how you learn, visit www.mrquickesteaches.com. There you're going to find stanza by stanza, line by line, and word for word analysis of all the 15 poems in your IGCSE anthology. Additionally, you can also find analysis of the prose and drama, character, themes, conflicts of both the drama component and the prose, and also information on the unseen paper if you're going to write the unseen paper. You can also visit mrquickesteaches.com to book for private tuition in Cambridge IGCS in the A level, and then in the O level in English literature, geography, and history. Or you can join our tribe on Telegram, Mr. Quickest Teaches IGCSE Literature. So that's it. Plenty by Isobel DIXON has been demystified. Thank you so much for joining today's lesson. Until next time, bye bye.